Okay, time now to take a look at the international papers. Diptyka Laurel joins us in studio. Diptyka, let's start with the man that's standing out to me there on the front page of Le Figaro, for example. It's North Korea threatening to pull out of the summit with the US in June.
That's right. That planned summit could be in jeopardy. This over joint military drills between the US and South Korea that led North Korea to cancel its summit with South Korea as well. The Rodong Sinmun, which is the official Communist Party paper, says in this article that even before the ink on the historic April 27th declaration was dry, even before the ink was dry, South Korea and the US have reacted to, quote, all the peace-loving efforts and good intentions shown by North Korea with rude and wicked provocation. Although in this article, they do not specifically say they are thinking of cancelling the summit. Now, for the New York Times, this kind of about face is really a return to form for North Korea. They've outlined other times in this article when Pyongyang has backed out of its commitments, showing, I quote, a pattern by the unpredictable regime.
Indeed, a lot of American diplomats saying really there was perhaps celebration a little bit too early, but the Washington Post has warned that it should ring alarm bells across in the US.
Well, in this article, the Washington Post says it does seem like it's a bluff from North Korea, that it is actually not going to go through with its threat, but it should serve as a wake-up call for the White House. The paper saying that Kim Jong-un appears to be following in the footsteps of his father from the 2005 nuclear weapons deal, in which he agreed to denuclearization. He pocketed the short-term economic gains and then violated the agreement afterwards. They say rather Trump should be contemplating a sort of partial or phasing deal rather than the all or nothing rhetoric we've been hearing.
Okay, well, let's move on to another story there. And we've seen hundreds of Venezuelans taking to the streets protesting against presidential polls set for Sunday.
A poll that President Nicolas Maduro is widely expected to win, mainly because the opposition's turnout is quite weak. There's already a boycott for many people not to vote at all. And the election was called early, so we won't see international observers present to take part in the democratic, to ensure the democracy of the process. Now, this writer from El Nacional, which is a Venezuelan paper, calls Sunday's vote an electoral farce that will not be recognized whatever happens. And interestingly, Venezuelans interviewed by the Washington Post talk about having their living conditions right now. In one case, one lady says she gets 1 day of water per month. We're talking blackouts, hunger, diseases like malaria coming back, and hyperinflation. The Post says even if Maduro wins on Sunday, he faces a far bigger test, and that test is maintaining his grip on a country that's quickly becoming a, quote, failed state, one that cannot even function as a government.
Indeed, it sounds like a pretty dire straits across there in Venezuela. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who lost in elections just last week, has had his house raided by police.
Well, after that shock victory in national elections by Mahathir Mohamad, the current Malaysian Prime Minister, it appears that he's vowed to crack down on corruption, and he's beginning with Najib Razak. In the early hours of Thursday, police raided his home. Mahathir has said there's sufficient evidence to investigate a multi-billion-dollar international money laundering scandal at a state fund that was founded by Najib Razak. Now, tackling corruption will remain Mahathir's biggest challenge as leader. That's what the South China Morning Post says in this opinion piece, even though he himself, Mahathir himself, has been called into question over corruption scandals dating back to his previous reigns as Prime Minister.
Meanwhile, let's move on to a debate, an internet debate. I don't think it's been quite as heated since that debate over which colour was a certain dress. This time, it's an audio recording that is pretty much dividing everybody that listens to it.
That's right. After the viral debate of the dress, we're in the middle of an oral debate that I can say has also infiltrated our newsroom as well this morning, Eve. Let's play this clip for you. In this clip, Eve, you're going to tell me what you hear. Do you hear Yanny or do you hear Laurel? Let's take a listen.
Laurel. 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 Laurel.
Yeah, I clearly hear Yanny, but our producer, who's in my ear, hears the opposite. He hears Laurel.
He said all morning he's been hearing Laurel. Some people say they've been hearing Yanny and then hearing Laurel. Anyway, it's roped in Twitter users. It's also roped in celebrities like the Greek composer Yanny, who said, He heard Yanny in the clip, predictably. Now, Salon, which is a website, explains that they've brought in audiologists and neuroscientists to break this down for us. And what they found is that the brain decides within a fraction of a second what it will hear, even before the ears have had time to register the sound. So if we are hearing Yanny, it's because our brain is registering the Y sound first. And if Chris, our producer, is hearing Laurel, it's because he's registering the L sound. And it's quite interesting because it just shows how the brain functions and how it sort of functions almost independently of what our ears are hearing.
Well, Chris is telling me that his brain is hurting now listening to that explanation. Let's finish up, though, with a new movement on social media.
That movement involves the procrastinators. They're people who procrastinate, put off doing important work by baking. There are nearly 30,000 procrastinators on Instagram who post regularly their procrasti cakes. It's supposedly rife among university students, that can be understood, overstressed professionals, and people who work from home.
It's not the worst way to procrastinate, though, is it? I mean, you're left with something lovely at the end.
And you still have the feeling you're being productive.
Exactly, so it's not really procrastinating. There you go. Diptyque Laurel, thanks a lot for that wrap-up of the international papers. Quick break now, but still to come this hour. Our Focus Report looks at the amount of attacks against homosexuals here in France. An average of 3 a day, according to figures from the Interior Ministry. Things thought to be getting worse rather than better.